This presentation will focus on Owen Shears's poem Valentine. Typically, we would expect a poem entitled Valentine to be reflective of a love poem, and certainly the poem itself is organised into a similar format that we might see in a sonnet, which is, as you know, a 14-line poem. Whereas in this particular poem, you'll note that it has 15 lines. That is significant because it shows you that perhaps the love within the poem is not quite as it should be, which seems to be the case as we read through the poem itself. In this particular poem, the speaker addresses his girlfriend, who's the Valentine of the title, recalling 3 memories from their trip to Paris. The first might be an image of a breakup, as the speaker follows his lover down an empty street. The second shows his desire for her as he watches her body, but the wet lashes might indicate tears. And the final image is one of reconciliation as they hold each other on the bed of the hotel room. The final memory is the one that he will keep. Shears has set this particular poem in Paris, which is a city that is synonymous with love. However, one thing that this poem deals with is the bittersweet nature of a relationship, in that love can be joyous and romantic, but at the same time it can be very painful and exhausting, as we see towards the end of the poem. In stanza 1, we have the reference to the lady's heels, but they're referred to as water torture. Now, normally we would associate high heels with, I suppose, appreciative of the female form, but here it seems that the heels themselves are, there's something quite bitter and awful about them, and that they're emptying before me down the Paris street, evacuated as the channels of our hearts, which is an indication that perhaps the couple in this particular poem have had an argument, and that whereas this might be a poem that expresses love, in this particular case, that the relationship is void of love, it's empty, as their evacuated hearts. The reader is given an impression of a story. It's not a narrative poem, but it does follow a narrative, if you like. So at the beginning we have perhaps the speaker of the poem who's following his partner down a street, perhaps after an argument. And in the third stanza, after the single line of that one will be a memory, that will be one memory, it then refers to the swing of the tassels on your skirt, each step filling out the curve of your hip. And this enjambed line indicates the desire perhaps that the speaker feels for his girlfriend. But again, it's tinged with this sense of sadness, expressed in the phrase wet lashes, the loss of everything we'd learnt. So it seems as if there's a tearful argument and a breakup that has taken place. In the fifth stanza, there seems to be a reconciliation. It says, then later holding each other on the hotel bed, like a pair of wrecked voyagers. So whereas perhaps this poem has confounded our expectations of what love should be, here we are presented with an image that we're more perhaps familiar with. So we have them holding each other on the hotel bed. And we also have this extended simile that's taking place as well, like a pair of wrecked voyagers and also washed up. So what we've had is this stormy relationship, the argument, this tempestuous situation that's taken place, a shipwreck as they're on the hotel bed, and then as they wake up then afterwards, only to wake washed up on the shore. So that's the reconciliation at the end. And this word exhaustion might not only evoke their recovery after this, these extreme emotions of arguing and then splitting up, but also their feelings after having been physically close once more. And the reader is left with this paradox at the end of the poem, as we're uncertain whether to laugh or weep, which evokes this overwrought state of mind produced by their intense relationship and the bittersweet feelings that love can bring. And this is somewhat an elegiac quality to this particular poem, because we have this joy of this love relationship at the end, but there is still a hint of future sorrow. And I suppose that this is really conveyed to the reader through the use of the rhyme at the end. So we're left with whether to laugh or weep, that my Valentine will be the one I'll keep. So we're left with the phrase I'll keep, as if to say that this relationship has been resolved and they're, once again their relationship is on track. But because of this rhyme with weep at the end, it's left with this quite sort of bitter and sorrowful tone at the end of the poem. And I suppose one of the things that Shears is doing in this particular poem is really satirising sonnets. Sonnets typically are there to declare your love to somebody in a very idealised, idealistic fashion normally. Whereas what Shears is conveying throughout this particular poem is that relationships are not always smooth and plain sailing. Often relationships are difficult. Just, I suppose, like a storm at sea. And we've seen similar poems to this in the Skirrid Hill collection, quite similar as well, perhaps in Winter Swans, which evokes a similar relationship. Relationships are often have to overcome difficult times. And we're certainly left with the feeling this particular poem that although they've managed to reconcile themselves in a physical way, perhaps this isn't going to be a lasting relationship.